So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session, a panel discussion on carbon capture and storage. And it's really to give people more insight into an exciting collaboration on a very interesting technology that we're looking at as a country in terms of responding to our climate change goals and really addressing key mitigation actions that we need to be implementing. I'm Ritumetse Molotsane, and I'm the Head of Environment at the National Business Initiative. It's a great pleasure again to welcome you not only to the session, but also to the South Africa Pavilion, which is in itself a partnership between business and government, and also speaks to some of the issues that we will be talking about here, the importance of partnerships and collaborations that we need to have in place in addition to the technological interventions that we're seeing in order to address climate change. I think it's a key moment here at COP28. We know that one of the big topics that's being discussed in the halls around the venue here is around the global stocktake. So really understanding where we are as a global community in responding to climate change. And we already know many of the answers are that we're not doing enough. We need to accelerate action. We need to be more ambitious. And we need to be able to put in place even more urgent climate action that will keep us within the goals that we want to see under the Paris Agreement. So really, as part of this session, we'll be looking at two key things here. Some insight into quite a big technology that requires a lot of work to implement in its totality, but one that also has promising potential if we're able to put in place all of the key elements for implementation. The second part of this panel also talks to what I mentioned right at the beginning, and that's the importance of partnerships. So we all know that in different spaces we are holding expertise, insights, and knowledge that needs to be activated within an ecosystem in order to get the scale of change that we need to see and the urgency of action that we need to be implementing. So we're going to get some more insight into what the collaboration between the Council for Geosciences and Exxaro actually looks like with regard to carbon capture and storage, and also get a sense of what are the next plans, how is this going to be implemented ultimately, I think, within the South African space, and how it speaks to our broader climate goals and what we're trying to achieve. So the format for this session will be, I think we can call it somewhat of a fireside chat. We're just going to be getting some insight into what really is happening at this partnership level and what we can anticipate to see going forward. So I'm just going to take a seat with you. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. Perhaps I'm going to let them introduce themselves and give us a sense of who they are, where they're coming from, and then we're going to just briefly reflect on a few questions that speak to the collaboration and get a better understanding of how this work is being implemented. Maybe to hand over to our panelists. Please go ahead, Lerato.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Lerato Khumalo. Work for Exxaro as the Climate Change and ESG Manager. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for joining us in what is a very important event for Exxaro and the CGS.
Good morning. My name is Tuli Khumalo. I am an executive manager at the Council for Geoscience. I'm also very well pleased to be here to talk about this partnership that we have with Exxaro.
Morning, everybody. Taufik Danse, the manager of the Minerals and Energy unit at the Council for Geoscience. Very happy to be here.
Super. So we've got, I think, a wonderful mixture of kind of technical expertise, but also really mobilizing that within a practical setting and starting to understand from a private sector, from a business perspective, how do we make some of these technologies and some of the opportunities that we're seeing quite real. So I think, as an opening question and just getting a sense of what we are really here for, what we want to talk about and understand how it fits in. Can you give us a sense of what is this MoU? What does it entail? What are you hoping to achieve? And it would be great to get that reflection from both organizations. So open it to the panel just to reflect.
If I may, so this MoU is very important for both organizations. And that's not only from a perspective of that will benefit from a sustainability point of view, but it also looks at the broader context that is societal, and especially looking at the South African context, where we face quite a number of challenges that are also, connected to sustainability-related issues. So we see this MoU as a key step in trying to address the challenges that I've just referred to, but most importantly, it's about contribution to decarbonization efforts from all levels, company, host community, and South African context, as I mentioned earlier on. And so what we hope to achieve through this MoU is to work and collaborate as partners on carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which is a very important technology when it comes to decarbonization efforts from a global context in particular, because for us to start dealing with the negative impacts of climate change and obviously the emissions profile that we are all worried about, especially given the physical risks that are associated with climate change, this becomes even more important for us as a business and feeds into our sustainability objectives, but also from a broader ESG context, we feel that this would be a very good contribution for Exxaro, and will live our vision and purpose through such activities and partnerships.
Thanks very much, Dr. Khumalo, and maybe moving on to you, and from the geosciences perspective, I mean, you're a custodian of research, scientific knowledge, but really also activating it so that it plays a practical role in our decarbonization journey. So just to get a sense from you in terms of your role, what you're hoping to achieve, and what the MoU speaks to, what is it about? That would be wonderful to get some details. I think both of you can contribute and just share some thoughts on what this partnership really means in that context.
Perhaps I can take it from the aspect of the just energy transition, just to start with, to say we have an understanding that we have to reduce emissions as a country over time, of course in a just way and justice for our people. And I think it's very important to mention that there's a large population of our country that relies on the coal value chain. And so decarbonization should take that into account to make sure that livelihoods are not disrupted in an unorderly manner. So these efforts are part of that action that South Africa is taking, and the Council for Geoscience is already doing a CCUS project in partnership with the World Bank that started quite a while back from Sanedi's side and is now with the CGS. And this partnership then expands the work beyond the partnership that we have with the World Bank to include South African business as well, like Exxaro. We have an MoU that we're talking about this morning. We also have an MoU with Sasol. And these are the efforts that we are doing collaboratively. As a science council, we have the knowledge and the base to do this work. And I'll let Dr. Dansey expand on the technicalities of that project.
No, thank you, Doc. Yeah, I think maybe one thing that has come out quite a lot from this COP28 is the so-called social compact that's been coming through. And what we now aim to do from the Council for Geoscience is to try and contribute towards these type of solutions. So South Africa generally has been a mining economy. We rely a lot on our natural resources. And in principle, that has also driven a lot of the socio-economic development. So in trying to balance, our net zero ambitions, but also maintaining that social and economic development, we have to find some type of innovative solutions. And we also understand that essentially the rocks below our feet, not only do they provide a lot of that drive towards socio-economic development, but they also provide these solutions. The technology we need will come from the ground, and being able to mitigate the CO2 can also be done using the ground. So this is actually a technology that can actually contribute towards this reduction of emissions. But not only that, what we anticipate is it's going to be a technology that is going to skyrocket. We anticipate by the next COP, there would be a lot of discussions around the implementation of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And I think it places South Africa at the forefront. We have a situation where there's quite a lot of emissions. There's quite a lot of relative emissions to coal specifically, but we also have this just transition pathway. And we feel that this particular MoU, it's very innovative in terms of it's starting that trajectory where we see that between Exxaro and the Council for Geoscience, we're probably going to be one of the first implementers, in fact, on the African continent, not just in South Africa. And I think this will be a perfect case study for what can be done moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Perhaps to go back to you, but also, welcome additional reflections. I mean, CCUS it's a big technology, and quite an interesting one. So it does require, I think, a degree of innovation, both in implementing all aspects of that kind of technological suite, if I may call it, but also activating, different partners, different actors within that ecosystem to be able to come together and actually implement. But there's also a lot of, controversy and sometimes skepticism, perhaps because it's such a big idea. So please just some insights in this space for our audience here. Is CCUS, is it feasible? Is it viable? How does this MoU kind of advance the understanding of what the technology is, what it works, and its potential within our decarbonization goals by 2050? I think getting a sense of what those key developments are, and again, how this particular MoU will help us to get a better sense of where does this technology fit in, can it really work, and how we can go about it.
Okay, no, thank you. So I think the first principle to think about is, if you put a price on carbon dioxide or a price on coal for that matter, there's a principle in terms of what does this actually contribute towards development, number one, on one side. And then, on the other side, you have basically the contribution towards your emissions. And I think that's been sort of economized quite significantly now recently, and a lot of the discussions around, how much money do you need to invest? That's the first principle. But then in the other principle is that we need to understand what is carbon dioxide. So it's a gas that increases global warming, of course, but we must remember that it actually comes from the earth. So it's not actually an unnatural gas in that principle. So if you think about that, what you're trying to do is you are extracting organic matter essentially from the ground. It's producing carbon dioxide and it goes into the atmosphere. Now what this technology tries to do is to take that very same organic material, carbon dioxide, and put it back into the ground where it came from. That's actually the principle. So in a way, you can actually look at it like recycling in principle. You're able to remove carbon from the ground, use the carbon for whatever technology you need, and then also return it to the ground. Now, we constantly look at the perception of coal relative to carbon dioxide, but we also have to remember that there's many other industries that produce carbon dioxide, and it's very critical to remember this. So one of the things that we are thinking about now is, for argument's sake, if we were to transition away from coal, which is one of our ambitions, what is the next major emitter? And sometimes the construction industry is a large contributor as well. So our shift will focus in terms of understanding that there are other emission sources. So what this technology is trying to do is to look at the value chain of carbon dioxide, understanding the different emission sources, number one, but then also understanding that this is an organic material that can actually, and sustainably be sequestered back into the ground. So that is actually what we are aiming to do with this technology. So it's a very simple principle. The challenge comes in terms of how do you do that? So it's very similar to things like, and again, you can use other examples. You can extract water from the ground. You can utilize some of the water, but eventually the water goes back into the ground, right? So this is the same principle with carbon dioxide. So what this technology is trying to do, and this MoU as well, is to understand, on one hand, you have essentially an industry that has removed your coal from the ground, produced carbon dioxide, and they need to understand where is a safe and sustainable place to replace that carbon back into the ground. What we are then trying to do is understand, and also to allay fears, what will happen once the carbon dioxide goes back into the ground? What is the quality of the carbon dioxide? What is the principles behind how that might interact with the groundwater? What will this mean for possible implications like seismicity and all those type of things? And that is where fundamental geoscience data is required. And the principle would be, there's a layer of coal or gas or oil. You've extracted it. You've created a void. It's a simple way to look at it. Once you remove volume, you've created a space for volume. And our idea is then to replace that space back with CO2, as an example. And then also to understand what type of geologies can react with that CO2 to permanently sequester it in the ground. So that's ultimately what we're aiming to achieve from this one.
Perhaps just to add a message to that, to say, building on Tafik's point on the different sources of carbon, there is criticism around CCUS that says, oh, you're saying we shouldn't move away from coal or these other fossil fuels and rather just use technologies to keep the status quo. I want to be clear that that's not the objective. The understanding is that in the transition, there will still be some form of carbon emissions left, no matter how well or how fast we transition. CCUS then brings this opportunity to say whatever carbon is left, whatever carbon that still exists, can be, sequestrated to ensure that we still have minimal contribution to the global warming problem.
Look, from an Exxaro perspective, we prioritize research and development because we recognize the critical or key role that R&D plays in terms of provision of information, but most importantly, contribution to innovative solutions to decarbonization. And not only that, decarbonization is about the broader and bigger challenges associated with climate change. And I think from our end, it became an imperative that we contribute, we partner and collaborate with the CGS on this, obviously recognizing the fact that if we do not do research and development, how are we going to get the responses and solutions that we seek to address the different challenges? And that culture of research and development is also extended to different institutions like universities. I mean, Exxaro sponsors quite a lot of university chairs that do research and development work in various sustainability and climate change related issues. And I think the CGS partnership and this MoU is very key. It's core. It's something that we live and breathe as an organization to contribute to research and development.
I think that's a very important point. So right at the beginning, as I was introducing the session, the focus was on the technology and the partnerships. But it's very clear that the research base, the systematic and really consistent approach to finding the solutions, but building a fact base that is robust, to explain the value of those technologies, to understand where they fit in and how they work, is a key part of what this partnership is about. So I think thank you very much for just raising that again and emphasizing. I'd like to go back to, I know I've got two Dr. Kumalos here, but to go back to Thuli. Earlier on at the South Africa Pavilion, you spoke to the work that's taking place on the test injection and working towards that. Perhaps as part of what was explained on that whole value chain and the systematic approach, just to touch a little bit on how that interfaces with this. Are they directly related? Is it one project? How are we putting all of the pieces together to get this technology off the ground?
So we have an existing project, which is what we are referring to our earlier presentation, that we are also still going to talk about in the last session of the pavilion. So we already started drilling. We're on site, and Tafik can talk to the detail of the drilling and all of that. That project is funded by the World Bank and by the CGS, of course. So it's a pilot project, it will end. But we are looking at upscaling. That's why we're in partnership. into partnerships now, because pilots come to an end. You've piloted, you've seen what the possibilities are, then we now want to upscale. This is where the partnerships come in. We now have this partnership MoU with Exxaro. Other industry players should come, I believe, on board, because CGS is a research council. We don't produce carbon, but we are part of the solution that the country needs in this transition that we are all about.
You understand the systems, and I think it's really about identifying those points as activation points where we can actually implement things. But I think that research, that very systematic and deep research, is such an important part of building our assets. So it's not just the know-how, it's not just the technology, but it's making sure that we are very much invested in understanding the broader impacts and how that fits into our country's development framing and our pathway. So just a few more questions on, just on something that sounds really exciting and very innovative. Maybe just to reflect a little bit on what the benefits of this MoU, maybe even at an organizational level. I think we've touched on maybe some of the broader benefits that we see, but what the benefits, what benefits you would anticipate at an organizational level, and maybe just a reflection as well, because it is a partnership, of what some of the challenges may be as you go about implementing the MoU and the broader uptake of the technology through research.
Yeah, so I think the benefits are quite self-explanatory from our end. Our objective is to decarbonize our activities, particularly our operations, but that also talks to the decarbonization of our portfolio, which is also very key. But from a technological point of view of decarbonizing Exxaro's operations, I think this project brings us closer to achieving our strategic objective of being carbon neutral by 2050, which is very key for us, because ultimately we have to contribute to national efforts of getting to the just energy transition. And how do you do that? You do that through a lens that looks at other broader contexts, not only the Exxaro context. And so it becomes very key for us to make decisions not only based on the benefits that would accrue to Exxaro, but looking at the other broader and outside our binary context, so to speak. So the decarbonization aspect obviously is a key benefit. But the second one is we obviously deal with different emission categories for carbon emissions. You've got scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And scope 3 is very key for us, and that's value chain related emissions, obviously from our suppliers and customers. And so our approach then does not delineate the decarbonization of that specific emission category to our value chain partners only. We want to benefit as well, but also create impact by assisting the value chain to get to a status of decarbonization and also feeding back into what our strategic objectives are. And this technology then provides us with an opportunity to further contribute to addressing these types of emissions, the scope 3 emissions, that is, and obviously the broader national emissions. And so it also talks to our strategic objectives, and our strategies are North Star. It's a very simple and effective strategy. It's called the Sustainable Growth and Impact Strategy. So we realize that in order for us to be a resilient business, we need to grow in a sustainable manner. And how do you do that? You do that through partaking in partnerships and collaboration and obviously dealing with some of the challenges that we have to deal with as a diversified mining company. So the benefits are just too many, but I think those two are very critical. But I also think this MoU and partnership also has the potential to also generate other benefits, looking at potentially other ways that we can, from a sustainability point of view, contribute and benefit the business in South Africa as a whole. But for me, I think taking into account the objectives of our country and obviously the just energy transition implementation plan by the PCC is also driving our approach in terms of how we look at benefits derived from partnerships, especially the public-private partnership that we've just entered into with the CGS. And then from an Exxaro point of view as well, from a technical perspective, we also have a lot to gain by working with the CGS, because this is a technology that they are experts in. They're sort of, at the forefront of ensuring that the research and development work that they're currently involved in contributes to something bigger for South Africa and the country. And for us to be part of that is actually a very huge benefit, because not only are we going to learn quite a lot from our partners, but we're also going to be part of something that could potentially change the decarbonization pathway that South Africa wants to take. And obviously, maybe even looking at the broader global benefits that can accrue from this type of partnership.
Maybe the same question, but I just want to tweak it a bit. I mean, you mentioned how some of this work was taking place under SNEDI, but this focus on CCUS has really placed the Council for Geosciences front and center when it comes to South Africa's kind of decarbonisation plans. So just reflecting from that perspective, as well as what was mentioned, as an implementation kind of pilot, it's something of this scale. We've not seen it on the continent regarding CCUS. So it's something that's also quite innovative, but also groundbreaking. So a similar question really on what are those benefits at an organizational level about entering into this partnership, and we know that they extend broader to the broader community as well, but I'd just be very keen to get that sense from you.
Perhaps I can start by, the CGS is a science council in South Africa with a lot of knowledge and base, and actually it's been around for over 100 years. And I think it's been known, but what you're saying is with this CCUS is now known in maybe other areas that wasn't known before as an organization. And there is so much expertise at the CGS, as the Science Council, of course, that drives research. And there's so many solutions for the country that haven't, in my view, been fully explored. Of course, our main mandate is to map the country, indicate the minerals, where they are, and all of that, and of course, other aspects. But with this, we all know CCUS has largely been done in shorelines. There are not many examples of inland CCUS projects, and here the CGS comes, the expertise to define the base, where the basin, where the CCUS can happen, to move it closer also to the main sources, where the carbon dioxide is largely generated, all of that, and characterizing the site geologically that is suitable for this work. That's one, I think, aspect that, just putting the CGS out there as frontline and as part of the solutions that we need as a country to decarbonize has been one advantage. I think you also asked the question that what do we foresee could be the challenges? I think we will have to grow at a faster rate because the decarbonization is quite urgent for us. And of course, for the world, because climate change impacts, unfortunately, in South Africa, we have all, that other regions would have one, but we have all. So it's critical for us to be part of the development path. As a state entity, I think it's clear that we want to be part of the solution. And I don't know, the CEO is also in the audience. If he wants to add, he may add. He's doing a sharp, but maybe he will just closing remarks, add something. Doc?
I think we have now seen that South Africa is probably one of the most resilient countries. The reason I say this is We have an economy that's built on mining. We have put in mechanisms to actually measure our CO2 emissions effectively. So we can actually put out numbers that you have confidence on. And then we also are willing to say we are going to reduce those emissions. In some respects, it's very amazing if you think about this. We are not trying to hide in terms of these challenges. Now, there are two ways you can address these challenges. You can be passive, and you can wait, which I think many nations during this COP summit have shown that they're willing to do. Let's see what happens. Let's see what technologies are coming out. I think what is critical here is that maybe the Council for Geoscience and Exxaro has decided to be more active and more proactive as well, and more reactive, all in one go. And that is to say that we are willing to, within the context of what the government has agreed to in terms of its emissions, we're going to try and be there at the forefront. What geoscience is very good at doing is telling you where there are minerals and what this minerals possibly means. And then you get industries like organizations like Exxaro that are brilliant at taking those minerals out and then developing the impact to the society. So essentially, we're now looking towards the future to say, well, here's our next challenge. We want to put something back in the ground. Council for Geoscience comes in with the X in terms of where X marks the spot. And then Exxaro is really going to help us in terms of understanding how do we do this technologically. And again, I think we must constantly remember South Africa's always been at the forefront when it comes to developing our Earth, actually. We have some of the deepest mines, some of the best exploration. We've gone into mechanization. We've agreed to all of the policies. Again, we haven't been shy or scared to do these things. And I think that probably encapsulates this MoU. And we hope this is just going to be the beginning of many more. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of references. I mean, there are a lot of X's sitting here. And I'm also hearing a little bit about maybe a future event or discussion on critical minerals. I think you're both really relevant in that space as well. But as we just close near the close of this particular panel, and we'll call on the CEO to provide some closing remarks. I'd just like to get from you, so what are the next steps? What can we expect? What do we look forward to? What will we be discussing at the next COP in relation to this MoU and what you're focusing on?
Yeah. So I think planning is very important, like in any partnership or collaboration. We've got a lot of planning to do in terms of threshing the details of how we are going to approach this partnership, but not only looking at the CGS and Exxaro as the main stakeholders, but other considerations as well in terms of the benefits, like you previously asked Ritumeti. And the details are going to unfold. And that's very key for us, because then they direct how and when we are going to be doing some of the activities that we plan to undertake as we take this partnership forward. And most importantly, I think for us is how do we, from a technical side, as Exxaro, also get involved in the planning stages of the way forward and taking this MoU further. Identification of other key stakeholders, I think, is very important, because we certainly do acknowledge that for such a partnership and a project of this magnitude, there are obviously going to be different skills and expertise that is required, and different contributions from other stakeholders that might not necessarily be from Exxaro or the CGS, and obviously taking that to the next level to say what role and contribution can they play in terms of taking this forward. The technicalities as well, in terms of how we get involved from Exxaro's side, is also going to be very key, because our objective is not only to learn, of which we obviously have quite a lot to learn from the CGS, and would obviously also rely quite heavily on their expertise. But what can we also bring to the table? And that's also part of the planning. What are you bringing to the table to make this partnership a fruitful one? And at the end of the day, I think that is what is very key for us as we map the way forward. There are other discussions, obviously, that will take place, but for me, the planning is very important in terms of what follows next after the signing of the MoU.
So you're going to have a mini COP when you get back.
Exactly, and then plan for the next COP, obviously.
It's covered. Okay, super. So thank you very much for just giving us some insight. It's like opening a window into what you're doing at an organizational level and just sharing that with us. Giving us a preview of what's to come. So very exciting, I think, when we're talking about the partnerships. We're talking about really building a very strong research base, a knowledge base that the country can also own. And we're also talking about really activating and utilizing technologies that are at the forefront. And I think to what was mentioned quite a lot is a lot of ambition and a lot of taking on the challenges. And we know that the challenges in this space are quite big, but it sounds like we're up to the mark. As I said, lots of X's across the panel, so we're hoping to find some very exciting kind of solutions and innovations in the future. So I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us, and really before the session closes, to call upon Mr. Musa Mabuza, who's the CEO of the Council for Geosciences, to just give us some closing remarks before we close the session. You're welcome to come to the panel.
Yes, my name is Tseko Ratseko from Exxaro. The comment I wanted to make is that this project is a project for the Council for Geoscience. It's led and has always been led, and I think it will always be led by the Council for Geoscience. We are a partner in the ecosystem, and I think we're probably going to have other partners led by the Council for Geoscience. But there's an important part of this relationship that I must also explain. Exxaro comes from ISCO, a government institution. It's quite possible that the ecosystem that was there to create Exxaro, which is ISCO, was the same ecosystem that created the Council of Geoscience many years ago. There is a natural partnership. So we hope going forward we will use that base to move on into developing this technology together in the MoU arrangement that we have. Thank you so much.
It's very long. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you and the panelists. Good morning, all. Madam Chair and the panel, you have ever so elegantly captured the essence of the MoU and the intent. I think for me is to say that I am loving the partnership approach between government and the private sector. And this is one, I hope, that will set the tone of partnership, because the government and the private sector, in finding solutions of a menace we have created as humanity, we will only be able to find those solutions faster, better, when we work and walk hip by hip. So these are truly exciting times for us, and I am very hopeful that to solve this problem and many other problems, the axis you were talking about, this would have demonstrated that it is possible together. So I truly believe, on behalf of the CGS family, and I think I like the challenge legal counsel is giving us, is presenting an opportunity for us to swallow Exxaro. Might just take you on this, but thank you very much. Shall we give them a fantastic round of applause? They've done a great job. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam.